Please welcome to the stage J.R. Storment, Executive Director of the FinOps Foundation.
Thank you. Good morning. Konnichiwa. I don't speak any Japanese, so that's as much as you're going to hear, but thank you so much for coming here today. My name is J.R. Storment. I'm the Executive Director of the FinOps Foundation, and I wanted to tell you that as one of our first major events here, we're excited to have you here, and we always start our events with the community. The FinOps Foundation's work is all about the community, and so I wanted you all to take a second to turn to your neighbors, someone you don't know, and introduce yourself, please, to your neighbor. All right, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Go. Oh. Didn't quite go. Okay, I think timer is just about up there. We're going to go ahead to the next slide. All right, did you all get to meet some new people? Okay, good. So this is my, thank you so much. This is my second time in Tokyo. I was here last night with much of the team from the Japan chapter of the FinOps Foundation. You're going to meet more of them in a little bit. Again, my name is J.R. Storment. I'm based in San Diego, California, and the FinOps Foundation team is based all around the world, but our team visiting here today from the UK and US primarily. I'm also co-author of the Cloud FinOps book, and many of you have worked on translating that book. Thank you so much for your efforts there. And if you need translations today, there is this app that if you can download this will help translate into Japanese and I think later into English when the Japanese session is happening. So we at the FinOps Foundation are a part of the Linux Foundation, and we are a little bit different than Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Many of you were here yesterday for KubeCon. While they focus on open source code, we focus on advancing the people who manage the value of cloud. So our work is all around connections and communities, events like this, education and certification. We do training, education, as well as best practices and standards. I'm going to talk more about those in a minute, but things like the focus specification and the FinOps framework. The FinOps Foundation community that you are all now a part of is currently on 6 continents around the world. We have about 85,000 people in the community. We've trained over 60,000 people, and we have a practitioner SME community of over 50,000 people as well. So some of these numbers are from the US, where I'm from, where the Fortune 100, which are the biggest 100 companies in the United States, 94 of those biggest 100 companies participate in the FinOps Foundation programs. Globally, we represent within the FinOps Foundation about $350 billion US of global cloud spend. So that is more than half of the global cloud spend. Across everything we do, we are a membership-based organization. We have about 175 corporate members, but our focus and our mission, as I said, is all about the people who do the work of FinOps. So everything we talk about and everything my team does is about helping you advance your careers, to get further along, to learn more, and to advance in your organizations. Click. There we go. So we have a lot of different programs that the FinOps Foundation runs around the world. I'm going to touch a little bit on most of these today. The community, first and foremost, as I mentioned, is what we're all about. We're going to talk a little bit about the FinOps framework. I'm going to talk about FinOps X, the focus specification, state of FinOps, and training and certification. How many of you were in San Diego at the FinOps X event last week? All right, a few familiar faces. So last week we had in San Diego, California, our main global event of about 2,000 people. This is a series of smaller regional events we're doing. We're doing 6 of these around the world this year. So Tokyo, London, Sao Paulo, Washington, D.C., Amsterdam, and India this year. And this is our first one here in Japan. So thank you so much for coming. So I wanted to start with a little history. I have been in the space of FinOps for about 15 years, long before it was called FinOps. And I wanted to start the story back in 2010. In 2010, the first of the cloud providers, AWS, their global revenue at the time was about $500 million US. At this point, when cloud started, obviously everything was very data center centric, a lot of CapEx spending, capital expenditures. Around 2015, the global cloud providers, AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, started to introduce programmatic billing feeds. This was the first time that the practice of starting to manage FinOps came to be with some of the data that we needed in order to make better decisions. Around 2017, in North America, in Europe, in Asia Pacific, in ANZ, we started to see the concept of a dedicated FinOps practitioner, the person whose job it was to manage the value of cloud. In most companies at that time, it was not called FinOps, and often it was not their primary job. It was a secondary function. It was part of SRE, or it was part of platform engineering, or it was part of some other part of a joint engineering and finance focused role. In 2019, we began the FinOps Foundation, the organization that myself and my team work for. And at this point, global cloud spending was about $60 billion, so a big increase. In 2020, we saw this introduction really of cloud-centric IT start to hit around the world. We joined the Linux Foundation in 2020, and this was the time, of course, of COVID and the global pandemic, which really started to accelerate cloud usage around the world. It was also in 2020 when we launched the very first Cloud FinOps book. In 2021, the FinOps framework launched. We're going to talk more about that. It's been through a lot of iterations. In 2022, we had the first FinOps X conference. It happened in Austin, Texas. We also started to see the introduction of FinOps for containers, particularly Kubernetes and related functions start to become a part of that. Global cloud spending increasing as we go up. In 2023, we launched the very first version of the Focus specification. I'm going to talk later about that, but that is the open source specification for unifying cloud spending. And in 2024, globally, we started to see an introduction of additional types of technology spending becoming a part of the FinOps practice. Particularly SaaS spending, data centers began to become more involved in the FinOps practice, and licensing as well. This last year, 2025, has been all about FinOps for AI. And with this combination of container spending, of SaaS spending, data centers, private cloud, and Gen AI, we see the FinOps practices now touching about $2 trillion US of global technology spending. And within the FinOps Foundation, as a membership-based trade association, we've seen an introduction of a lot of new members this last 6 months joining the FinOps Foundation that represent this diversified mix of companies. We've had hardware providers like NVIDIA and AMD join the FinOps Foundation. We've had platform providers like Snowflake, data center providers like Switch, as well as more global clouds like Alibaba Cloud, and large FinOps practices like American Express join as well. So the FinOps framework, which is the open source framework for how to deliver a FinOps practice in your organization, first introduced in 2021, just had an update in 2025 that I want to talk through some changes on. First, though, this is the definition of FinOps that the FinOps Foundation has been evolving for the last 5 to 6 years. It sits in GitHub in an open source format, so you can track the versions and changes. This year, in 2025, a very small change was made. Just the words "and technology" were added to the definition. And that represents the expansion that we've seen in the market of FinOps from cloud to SaaS, beginning to touch data center, licensing, and other areas. At its core, FinOps is all about bringing together technology teams, engineering teams, with business teams to focus on maximizing the value of cloud and technology. FinOps is a cultural practice. It's an operational framework. It is not a technology. FinOps is about how your organization works together with other parts of the organization to get more value out of your cloud and technology spending. The FinOps framework also has a set of principles. These principles were largely untouched since 2019 when they first were launched, with a few changes. This year, these used to say business value drives cloud decisions, cloud usage, etc. Those have been updated to say technology. And this principle has been updated as well to say that FinOps should be enabled centrally. Often there will be a central FinOps team, but in most cases, as you're getting started, the function is pushed out from a central organization, driving still distributed accountability throughout. The FinOps framework in 2025, the yellow highlights are updates that happened this last year. Some small changes were made to the domains and capabilities, but the big change this year was the addition across the top of FinOps scopes. FinOps scopes brought in additional types of spending into the FinOps framework. And as we've seen FinOps become more critical in large organizations, we brought in the concept of FinOps sitting between business strategy and technology strategy, as increasingly organizations are looking to FinOps not just to do cost optimization, not to do cost reduction, but to help drive better decisions throughout the organization with better data. So the concept we've seen start to come up in the last year is this idea of FinOps-enabled executive decisions. The idea here is that the FinOps practice is taking and translating inputs from the business strategy, from CEOs, from CIOs, and the technology strategy to define a scope of the practice which affects how FinOps is implemented in the organization. It changes which personas are involved, which capabilities of FinOps are focused on, as well as the speed of maturity and the phases that we go through. And the executives are feeding insights down to help drive FinOps, but we see the FinOps teams feeding data back up around unit economics and trends and drivers to help inform executive strategy. FinOps is really baked and grew up in the principles of Kaizen, which obviously started here in Japan, and the idea that we want to do continuous optimization, not just at the top level, but from the CEO all the way down to the factory floor, from the engineer to the VPs to the CEO, and all the stack back and forth with continuous improvement. So when we think about how this looks in the real life, at the top level, there might be a board or C-level mandate to enter new markets or deliver new products. The FinOps team is going to coordinate between those business needs and the technology side to say, hey, we need to go do strategic partnerships and investments with a cloud provider or with our data center provider or with our software providers. From that, the business strategy of driving different products will then be shared over to the technology side to choose which types of services at the cloud provider or data center provider. And then on the bottom, we're seeing the whole stack of C-suite VPs and directors start to implement that strategy to align how we're going to go to market with the technology strategy around architecture and engineering efficiency. And of course, feeding data back up to continuously change and improve the product life cycles. So when you're looking at a FinOps scope for cloud, you're often looking at how to do that efficiently. So the capabilities that you might be looking at for cloud might be allocation, might be planning and estimating, forecasting, looking at unit economics. You might decide to pull in rate optimization or workload optimization. All of this, of course, though, will be driven by the executive strategy and the business strategy to help drive the outcomes that you're looking for. So the FinOps Foundation runs a lot of different working groups around the world focused on best practices. We run working groups that work in 8 to 12-week sprints, and they put out these best practices in an open source format for you to consume. These are some of the recent introductions of new open source best practices. These are available on the FinOps.org website. And a lot of those feed in then to certifications and trainings that enable you and your teams to get better at managing your cloud. Last year, in 2024, we started to see an influx, though, of a new type of FinOps practice. At our global conference in San Diego, FinOps X in 2024, we saw new talks starting to come in from companies like Meta about how to do FinOps in private cloud and data center. We saw talks about how to do FinOps on SaaS and software, how to start to optimize those by companies like Booking and Under Armour. Our annual survey, the State of FinOps survey, in 2025, this launched in January, started to support this with data from the global FinOps practices about what types of technology companies were being asked to manage in their FinOps practice. 65% of global FinOps practices in 2025 were being asked to manage software as a service. 39% private cloud, data center a little less, and of course, the hot topic for everyone right now, FinOps for AI. The majority of practices this year are being asked to manage and optimize their AI spend as part of the FinOps practice. So we introduced at the beginning of this year a concept called FinOps Scopes. Scopes are a segment of technology-related spending to which FinOps practitioners apply FinOps concepts. So what that means is FinOps needs to look, as we said, between the business and technology strategy to define outputs that we want to get to, and then again, drive different capabilities from the framework, drive different domains and outputs we want, drive different phases of maturity. The business strategy sets those inputs to both determine what we want to get out of the FinOps practice, but also the types of technology spend that we're going to consider. We might consider cloud, we might consider data center, we might consider SaaS. Next, then, we set the scope of the FinOps practice. Your organization might have lots of different scopes. You might have an efficient cloud scope, you might have a data center scope, a SaaS scope. These are defined by you based on your business needs. And then we define how the FinOps practice is operating, which capabilities we're going to focus on, which metrics we're going to use. If we're highly focused on efficiency, we might be more about reducing waste. If we're trying to move out of a data center quickly, we might be focused more on speed and acceleration of workload placements. So depending on your business goals, you're going to have different scopes of your FinOps practice. As I mentioned, many of you will be running an efficient cloud scope. If you're at a large organization with lots of different business units, you might have 10 different efficient cloud scopes. You might have one for a business unit that is focused on AWS, another for a business unit that's in Google, another for a business unit in Azure. One business unit may also be focused on innovating with AI, so you'll have a different set of capabilities. These are FinOps framework capabilities that get pulled into the scope. Again, you might be looking at migrating in or out of a data center, and you might have even a licensing scope where you're applying a different set of capabilities to your FinOps practice. Now, underneath each of these, you'll also see that different personas may be involved. You might involve more security team in one that's dealing with new technology. You might involve the sustainability team if you're focused on carbon outputs. You might involve different product teams if the FinOps practice is feeding data back into product strategy. You're also going to be pulling in different data sources and different KPIs depending on your scope. And the maturity of these KPIs will be influenced by your business strategy. In an efficient cloud scope, you might dig heavily into optimizing maturity, whereas in a licensing scope, you might not be thinking about optimizing. You might be focusing more on budgeting and allocation. So part of these open source working groups that the FinOps Foundation does is putting out new best practices for these new scopes of spending. We ran a series of working groups this year, beginning in January up through June, that put out some of these best practices. These just launched 3 weeks ago now, 2 or 3 weeks ago, that are best practice working group outputs for how to start to do FinOps on SaaS, how to start to apply the FinOps framework. And just 2 weeks ago as well, we announced a partnership with the ITAM Forum, the global organization that does software asset management and IT asset management, to work more closely together with them around joint working groups as well as joint training that will be coming out later this year as part of a FinOps for SaaS training and certification efforts. We are increasingly seeing that FinOps practices are collaborating very closely with IT asset management and software asset management practices to optimize both the cost, but also manage compliance, licensing, and related app rationalization. We've also had a set of working groups that recently started to output for the first time how to do FinOps in the data center. These are very foundational. This is a new practice for many organizations. Shortly, we're going to hear from one of our practitioners, Natalie Daley, who's going to share more about how they are doing this in their organization. But this is a start of, I think, a big change in what is happening globally with FinOps being applied not just to cloud, but to optimize data center efficiency, traceability, allocation, and the ability to get more out of the investments that have been made there. This is a typical adoption curve that we see within the community. In fact, this slide is actually from the Disney company, the Walt Disney Company. They presented this at our conference 2 weeks ago in San Diego, where they started their cloud FinOps practice in 2022, later added SaaS management, started to begin to bring in on-premise optimization and utilization, started to then look across the entire application footprint within the FinOps practice, and are now looking at a cloud plus, meaning cloud plus data center, cloud plus SaaS, cloud plus licensing view across all their environments, and integrating, of course, shared FinOps principles across all of these, focused on decentralized ownership of usage accountability, centralized management of rate optimization, giving everyone a view of their data as part of this. So I wanted to take a minute as well to welcome to this stage a very important person for the FinOps Foundation. This particular speaker came all the way out here from London. Natalie Daley has been part of the FinOps Foundation governing board for many years and has spoken at FinOps X multiple times. Please welcome to the stage, Natalie Daley from HSBC.
Hello, everyone. Konnichiwa. Welcome to FinOps X Tokyo. My name is Natalie Daley, and I'm the Global Head of Cloud Economics and Infrastructure FinOps at HSBC. I'm very honored to be here with you today, and I hope to share some of the highlights of our FinOps journey from beginning to date. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time here unpacking this slide for you. But let's start at the beginning. That's where I'd like to start our talk today. So 2019 was a very exciting time at HSBC. We had a multi-cloud strategy and a top-down mandate to help our businesses migrate and a cloud roadmap to fulfill that. Now, of course, with accelerated adoption, brings about large, complex cloud bills. For us, they were millions of lines long, no longer manageable within Excel. We had multiple lines of businesses moving to the cloud simultaneously and taking advantage of all the things that cloud has to offer. And we had a responsibility to start billing and charging that consumption to those consuming entities. At the time, I was in a COO role, and the CIO and I were tasked with pulling all of this together, helping to implement the cloud platforms and getting our financials under control. So we thought about implementing a FinOps practice. The key triggers for that was the transparency and management of cost. Now, what's true then and what is true now is when I think about FinOps, I think about people, I think about shared accountability, a change in culture, and a discipline that helps bring about transparency and clarity to your cloud spend, especially when you are growing. So we took the time to take those principles into account when we started to think about how we would want to implement our FinOps practice within HSBC. We thought about our target operating model. We thought about the personas and the roles that we need within the organization. We looked at tooling as part of that solution, and also governance and MI. How are we going to manage this throughout the organization, and how are we going to encourage the organization to change? 2020 was the go live for our FinOps practice. We went live across all of our business lines, and we had our tooling prepared at that time. But we phased in some of the key foundational core principles and capabilities of FinOps. So we started with cost transparency, cost allocation. We then moved to forecasting, estimating, and cost allocation and budgeting. Now, as you can see, across the top represents the size of the team, which has grown quite a bit over the past few years. I'll talk a bit more about what that looks like and how we evolved as a team. But you can also see, if you look at the cloud spend line, the speed at which our cloud spend was growing. Within those first 3 years, our cloud spend tripled. It was a multi-cloud strategy, as I mentioned before, so we were on all the major clouds, and our cloud spend was sizable. In that first year, while we were standing up our FinOps practice, we also started with optimizations, pulling down the low-hanging fruit and ensuring that we were delivering benefit from the start. And that benefit was delivered straight into our business lines. We stood up what's called a hub and spoke model. So we had a centralized team that had frameworks, MI, tooling, and also helped train and educate the organization. But we had FinOps champions that sat within each of the business lines that were our conduits into the engineering teams, executive leadership, and also finance and procurement teams. Our first year of benefit realization was about 2% of the overall spend. Luckily for me, it was more than it cost to actually stand up the program, so that was great. And then we moved into 2021, and we saw a cost reduction or takeout of approximately 7%. Now, that shift from 2% to 7% may not sound like a great deal, but if you think about it, the cloud spend had tripled during that time. So 7% of a much bigger number was generally becoming sizable. And we did that through optimization. I'll be talking a little bit more about what that looked like. So fast forward to 2022, we've now stood up all of our core foundational capabilities, and this really was the foundation upon which we were able to accelerate and lean into other areas of the business like unit economics and helping drive strategic decisioning moving forwards. We also started to stand up new capabilities, so you can see additional workload optimization, marketplace purchases was something that we do on behalf of the organization, anomaly management, detection, and more preventative controls around helping the organization to understand their spend, but also make sure that we're minimizing things like bill shock. And when we did see instances of this, we were able to respond quickly. By 2022, we're also charging out 100% of our cloud spend. That included all the shared costs from the platforms at a 99% accuracy rate, which was quite significant considering the complexity of our cloud estate and the size of the bills. Moving forward now from 2022 down to 2023 and 2024, and what you can see here is the ramping up of our optimization activities. And that is optimization that we ran centrally, so recommendations that we shared with the business, opportunities that we identified, but also we set up a two-way communication with the engineers and the business lines themselves, and they came to us with ideas that we also shared with other GPGFs and other business lines. We also started to look at things like automation and shift left FinOps. So we were implementing optimization tactics that in a completely automated way, and therefore no human intervention was part of it. Some of the low-hanging fruit, again, this has to be within the risk appetite of your organization, but it's something we moved into. And then we were looking at unit economics, process changes that would also influence our cost environment. Moving into 2024 and 2025, it aligns very much to what JR mentioned earlier. The success of what we've done on the public cloud platforms, we're now asked to then look at the wider cost base and the wider infrastructure. So our FinOps team now does public cloud, internal cloud, and on-premise. We'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in later slides. You also see that we have additional capabilities continually being stood up. So we have AI, architecting for cloud, hardware asset management, data center, FinOps, all coming into play now for 2024 and 2025 and beyond. You'll also see a significant jump in the amount of FTE, so that's people within my team, and that's because we made a strategic decision for the technical business management team who were managing our infrastructure costs to come all under the FinOps umbrella. So we now have that end-to-end from a billing, cost, and optimization within one team and delivering benefits out to the business. During this journey, we were also able to win a few accolades along the way, certifying the team and also becoming part of the governing board, as JR mentioned earlier. So as our practice matured, so did our optimization capabilities. And what this slide represents is an illustration of the type of optimization tactics that we have running at any one time. The numbers next to each item represent the amount of platforms that we run these tactics on. And if you were to add up all of these opportunities and all of these tactics, it equates to about 80 different tactics running simultaneously across all of our platforms at any one time. Now, for us to be able to translate the benefit of that, the value of that to the business, not just from a cost point of view, but from a unit economics point of view and from an end-to-end business benefit, the foundations that we implemented early on in the program, so the cost transparency, the benefit tracking, all of those processes and governance is through that structure that we're able to demonstrate the benefit of each of these tactics. And we have traceability from tactic down to business line, cost pool, product, any which way that the organization wishes to view, we're able to translate it, and it is near enough real time. And this was built up over time, but we find it invaluable when it comes to explaining the value of cloud and the migration journey that we're on as an organization. So, as with all organizations, when it comes to FinOps, we have our challenges. We talked a lot earlier about governance, strategy, and helping the organization make data-driven decisioning. But also we want to focus on the engineers who actually help us deliver a lot of the recommendations and opportunities that we push out to the organizations. After a few years of going through this journey, there's such a thing as optimization fatigue. You know, the engineers have lots of competing priorities. They have resilience, security, cyber, and then they have a FinOps team sending them lots of recommendations and things that we'd like them to action. We wanted to ensure that we were able to encourage and continue the momentum around the engagement of our engineers. One of the key principles around FinOps is the meeting of teams and working together collaborative and that shared accountability. And we needed to keep that momentum going with our engineers on the ground. So one of the things that we've done recently is run a cloud hackathon specifically for FinOps. We had 1,600 gamers play across 10 separate countries, across 2 major CSPs. And what we found in doing that is not only did we capture some of the new engineers, new joiners, we reinvigorated the excitement around optimization that we had in our first years. People learned new skills. People were able to share some of those learnings. And what we've also found is there's a buzz that continues beyond the hackathon itself. And those who didn't attend have a little bit of FOMO, so fear of missing out that they weren't there. And more importantly, what we're able to find is that those individuals are taking those skills back to their day jobs, actually implementing the skills that they learned, and also working closely with teams that they may not have met on a normal working day. So, expansions on scope. Something that JR mentioned earlier in terms of the way that we are implementing FinOps into other areas. And what I've done here is just drilled into a few examples of how we've been able to do that. So shift left, and this is also listed in order of maturity. So shift left FinOps automation is something that we've been working on and focused on for a number of years now. And we have refined that process. We have a really great cadence going with our platform teams, with our architecture teams, and with our cyber teams. Within my FinOps team, we have a engineering capability. So we're able to develop code for our enforcement policies. And those codes are validated by the platform teams, and they are deployed across all business lines simultaneously. They take action in our dev environments, and then for production environments, of course, there's lots of sensitivity around production. It produces a compliance violation. Now, those dashboards exist already. As engineers, you have compliance dashboards and you have compliance views. And what we've now done is added a FinOps component to that, and they have their SLAs as well. So we're able to drive action through automation and also compliance from an engineering point of view. So FinOps on-prem data centers is quite different to public cloud. I think one of the things that we had to focus on early on was, why were we doing this? What is the outcome? Unlike public cloud, you take an action and there's what we call instant gratification, instant reward. On-premise, that's not the case. So what is driving the action and the desire to do that? And we looked at it from two distinct angles. The first one is, eliminating waste and more efficient use of your infrastructure is a bit of a no-brainer. Everyone supports that. And the cost takeout, we accepted proactively that this is more of a long-term play. And therefore, the collaboration of all the businesses focusing on optimizing our on-premise infrastructure in the long term will put us in a better financial position. The immediate reward is, in the short term, is creating room for growth. As with most organizations, we've got growth on cloud, we've got growth on on-premise infrastructure, we've got growth all across the organization as businesses become more digitized. What we're trying to do and what we're able to demonstrate through what we deliver from a FinOps capability on-prem is that we're creating space to do more. We're redeploying kit that is handed back from our optimizing activities and using that to fund new programs, new work, and moving the organization forward. And then another area that we're focusing on is SaaS and licensing optimization. Now, enterprise organizations have quite a significant SaaS footprint. We certainly do. And one of the things that was a challenge for us was understanding the entitlements within our licensing agreements and what we're actually using as an organization. Were we leveraging some of these big licensing contracts effectively? Were we moving our licensing around the organization as business needs required? And were we optimizing licensing where we had that opportunity in the contracts? So we focused on some key renewable contracts within the next 18 months. We used our data skills from a FinOps point of view to bring those two data sets together. And we were actually able to identify places where we were not effectively using our licenses, where we could optimize on our licensing footprint, and that directly translated to cost reduction and better utilization of our licensing. So that was an area that's been very successful for us, and we will continue to do more in that space. So while we have looked at the breadth of our FinOps optimization and our FinOps capabilities, we've also looked at the depth of the service offerings that we are giving and delivering to the organizations. So we've got scopes, we've expanded our FinOps across different scopes, but we've also looked at ways that we can add additional business value. And we've got some examples here. So CSP price changes. Many of you who are engaging with cloud service providers know that pricing changes happen on a fairly regular basis. They may not be immediately visible to you. They might be in a component, or it might be in the way that you leverage the pricing or leverage that product. What we were able to do, and again, based on the data that we have in relation to the way that we have structured our FinOps capability, we're able to be proactive for our businesses, do that analysis centrally, understand the impacts to the businesses and the business usage of those products. And then we went out to those businesses, highlighted to them what the impacts were, and then offered them opportunities to do two things. Firstly, you can optimize to offset any cost increases, but more importantly, at times, it was more about the business process that needed to change, the way that they were utilizing that product or the way that they were utilizing that particular feature. And we were able to give them that advice as to how to change their processes and therefore either not be impact or minimize the impact from those pricing changes. Minimum revenue commits, essentially that's the way you engage with a service provider. Now, your strength of your forecasts and your ability to predict where you might be in outer years gives you a better position from a discount point of view from a CSP engagement and a minimum revenue commit. What we're able to do, because we have that trend analysis and that data built up with time, is to do scenario modeling, where strategic decisions are being made at the top of the house, whether it be targets or whether it be cost changes or whether it be product deployments, and we're able to model what that will mean for us as an organization on our minimum revenue commits. Those are commits. So we are obliged to fund and pay those CSPs. And what we want to make sure is that we're getting the maximum value for what we have committed as an organization. And we can do that outward projection and help inform executive leadership around their strategic decisioning. And that leads me on to the last one here, which is application placement strategy. So as we have matured in our cloud journey as an organization, we have looked at our applications in a more measured way across all of our infrastructure. And now it's about placing our applications in the right place, not necessarily directly on public cloud or always on-prem as the organization has been used to. And how do we make that decision in a standardized way? FinOps forms a fundamental part of the data utilized of how we can ensure that we are placing our products in the right location and applications in the right location for value and value realization. So, where does your FinOps team sit? I think every organization is different. Every organization will have, different opportunities or different ideas as to where a FinOps capability would sit. I think generally, as JR said earlier, you find predominantly a centralized capability and a federated model, but where do you put that centralized capability? What I found works really well is placing your FinOps capability in a place where there is an affiliation or association with your engineering and technical community, as well as your finance community. So as you can see here, this is a high-level illustration of where my FinOps capability sits. We don't report directly into the CTO for the bank, which is 2 levels from the CEO level. And within CTO, we have platforms, architecture, infrastructure, technology centers, and data. And then we have a COO capability, which straddles all of those business lines within CTO. And we support all of the global business lines across the whole organization. Just to give an order of magnitude, the CTO function is about 19,000 people in HSBC, so it's sizable. And it covers the whole complexity of the organization. And by us being positioned here, we have a line into the COO, which is the financial part of the organization, the operational part of the organization. And that's what enabled us to be able to implement things into, be part of the financial planning process, etc. But we also have a conduit into the engineers, those who are on the ground, who are impacting not just our public cloud spend, but instrumental in supporting us on our FinOps journey of our on-premise infrastructure as well. So teams evolution. We started with the standard, I'd say, FinOps personas within the teams. And that has built out over time with increased personas. So you see the FinOps practitioners, we had engineers, we have finance specialists and business management type specialists. And that really helps us translate the costs and the billings to the wider organization, whether it be an engineer, whether it be an architect, whether it be procurement, whether it be the business. All of these personas are essential to being able to manage your infrastructure and cloud spend effectively. With time and the uplift of the capabilities that we deliver to the organization, we now have data scientists, have AI skills, we've brought in things like sustainability, and we've also got our tooling ecosystem and architecture in SRE. And this view gives you an idea of all the different personas within our organization that we interact with to be successful. The key component here is collaboration and coordination. MI is essential, accurate and timely management information, and being clear on what you're delivering with that management information, to whom and for what purpose. You can also see here that we have cyber, executive leadership, and that's around decisioning that JR mentioned earlier, strategic decisioning, IT service owners, right down to platform owners, product owners, cloud leads, and even end user device teams. We do optimization on our on-premise infrastructure and also our end user devices. And lastly, can't give a presentation without talking about AI. So this is where we are at the moment with our AI plans within HSBC. And this is FinOps for AI and AI for FinOps. We are looking at both of those areas. I'll just step through each one of these. So the first three are more about FinOps for AI. Most organizations, as they come to grips with AI, they start to implement, and we certainly have, governance and controls and approvals and clear outlines and business cases of where AI is suitable within that organization. One of the things that we do for HSBC that we support in this process is around making sure that those who are leveraging and utilizing AI, and this is through our cost transparency reporting, actually have the approval to do so. And it helps the bank keep the resilience and the controls across the platform around AI consumption, especially generative AI. Cost transparency and optimization opportunities for AI, context management, guidance and model selection, prompt engineering. These are all areas where the data from FinOps can be utilized to give guidance on how to consume AI in a more cost-effective way. And then ourselves, for our own processes, we're looking to use machine learning to help us refine things like our forecasting accuracy. At present, we're around 3.35%. It's pretty good. But if I am to tune that and fine-tune that further, we are going to need to use some sort of AI and ML model. So we're looking at how we can implement that and incorporate that and refine on that even further. Okay, that brings me to the end of my presentation today. Thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Thank you. So Natalie touched on so many things that are relevant to the FinOps journey. First and foremost, when you saw that big slide she had up there with all the different personas and people, that's FinOps, right? It's not one technology or one team. It's a lot of teams working together. One of our presenters last 2 weeks ago at the conference referred to FinOps as the central nervous system for an organization because it can connect these teams with the data they need to make better decisions. Another thing she mentioned that I think is notable is this idea that FinOps increasingly is helping define where applications will land. Look at the cost, look at the impacts, figure out what should go to cloud, what should go to data center, what should go to SaaS. And of course, as we're going to touch on at the end of today at 4 o'clock, FinOps for AI and what that looks like, getting into prompt engineering and caching and LLM and model selections as well. So we've talked about a lot of these different programs that the FinOps Foundation covers. I wanted to dig a little bit more into one particular area from the state of FinOps data. So this is our annual survey, and this is going to start in a couple more months for 2026. We encourage you to take that. But one of the most interesting data points from the state of FinOps survey in 2025 was this, that AI is creating more need for FinOps in the space because a lot of AI projects have threats from cost AI has amazing capabilities, and generative AI has amazing ability to change your business, but it can be very expensive depending on how you run it. And AI right now is very much like cloud was many years ago. It's a new technology that people are trying to understand. Costs are often soaring, and it can create a real challenge to the organization in terms of the dollars or yen associated with that. So there's two things we want to talk about here. Natalie stole my thunder on this. There's FinOps for AI, which is how can FinOps help AI control its costs? And then there's AI for FinOps, which is how can we use AI to get better at forecasting, to get better at anomaly detection, to get better at understanding of costs. Both of these are really important. Today, in the FinOps practices, this is where a lot of the focus is. Everyone is trying to figure out how to manage the cost of their AI while they figure out how to use the AI. We're going to see a lot of technology vendors, the clouds, for example, putting out better ways to use AI to help your FinOps practice. But at the FinOps Foundation, we're often focused here. How do we get the most value out of our AI spending? Because in organizations, and I chatted with a few of you before this as well, everybody's using cloud. Right? You've got Gen AI on your cloud provider, but increasingly people are also buying GPUs for their data center. People are using services like OpenAI and SaaS offerings for AI. And we see AI exist across all of these different types of technology spend. So earlier when we talked about scopes, AI becomes a scope of your of your FinOps practice. And importantly, because people are looking to AI to change their business, to revolutionize their experience and drive new products, they often want to treat the AI spending differently than the rest of the cloud spending. So, for example, when we think about how to define a scope for our FinOps practice, we typically have this trade-off between cost, speed, and quality, right? When do we want to move quickly? When do we need to save cost? When do we need to deliver the best outcomes? And again, the business strategy drives the constraints and the scopes of your FinOps practice. So let's put together a new scope together of our FinOps practice, specifically for AI. So imagine we're building an innovative new AI app. So as we're starting to do this, we're probably, because it's AI, we're probably going to focus less on cost and more about speed and quality. We want to use AI to change our business. So as we're building out the scope of our FinOps practice for AI, we're likely willing to spend more money here because it's a new technology that we're trying to make major impacts with. We're going to focus on innovation and speed, and we probably want to be mindful of the carbon outputs because generative AI can use a lot of power as a result. So as we start to then look at our technology strategy, we might actually split things up. We might use data center for some of our LLM model training in-house, as we're seeing a lot of the banks doing. We might use public cloud for some portion of our development or inference. We might have partnerships with the cloud providers, and we might also be using Kubernetes across these different providers to power that Gen AI application. So based on that, we're going to look at a different set of infrastructure. Natalie mentioned being on 4 different clouds and platforms. A lot of large organizations are also looking at FinOps across the data center. It might be SaaS. You might be pulling out different accounts or services as part of that. And because we're focused on AI acceleration, we're going to have a different set of personas engaged. Of course, leadership and engineering. We might also pull in the sustainability team. Natalie showed all those teams coming together, and the product teams using AI to drive this. From that and the FinOps framework, there are all those capabilities. We're going to pull out the capabilities that matter. For AI, we find in the 2025 state of FinOps data, most companies are not optimizing yet. They're really just focused on how do I allocate the spend? How do I understand the value of the AI spend? How do I find anomalies, right? Spikes in our spending before they get too large. And as a result, that's going to define how we go through the FinOps practice. It's going to define the speed at which we move. AI is moving quickly, so we need to build our FinOps practice accordingly. It also means we may have low maturity in some of these capabilities. We might decide we don't care as much right now about reporting analytics. We really care about allocation. So we're going to move more quickly through that. So one of the things the foundation has recently put out, the FinOps Foundation, is this new certification that helps pull together a lot of the best practices we've seen from the working groups around this. This just launched 2 weeks ago. It's a 4-part certification that includes 4 levels. There's an introduction now, as well as multiple levels landing over the next 6 months, culminating in the FinOps Certified FinOps for AI certification. This joins as a big part of, as I said, we focus on community and education. This joins for us a large set of certifications that the FinOps Foundation offers in this area How many of you are FinOps certified currently? Oh, great. A lot of the room. Practitioner certified? Any professionals in the room? FinOps professionals. All right, that's the big one. Anybody have FinOps for AI? No, that one's not ready yet. Okay, good. That was a test. So please consider looking at these for yourself and your teams, because they really help build the basis for how to build out your FinOps practice in your organization. All of these assets are also available now on the FinOps.org website. These are outputs of our working groups. They are open source, freely available assets on FinOps.org. Each of these is, there's 110 pages of documentation around how to start to manage your AI spend. All of these come together, of course, into the certification. We have a whole new set of working groups over here that are landing in the next couple months, so there will be more and more best practices coming out on FinOps for AI as we move forward. So these are the global programs. I want to focus in on this. So who knows about the Focus project currently? How many people in the room? Okay, a few. So a few years ago, we realized that everyone, whether they be practitioners or vendors or clouds, they were all trying to solve the same problem underneath their FinOps practice, which was, how do we understand the data we're getting from the cloud providers? And when we have 4 clouds, like Natalie was talking about, or we have lots of different teams involved, how do we make the data of FinOps, the cost data, the usage data, easier to understand? So we launched 2 years ago this open source project called the FinOps Open Cost and Usage Specification, FOCUS, F-O-C-U-S. This is a free open source specification that the FinOps Foundation publishes onto GitHub that essentially helps to unify the language. It creates a common language for FinOps data. What it does is, as a specification, is provide a set of common terms that cloud providers, SaaS providers, and even your data center spending can be used by practitioners, by service providers like systems integrators, SIs, by tool providers, technology providers, to get to the outcomes that we want from the FinOps practice. So Focus is not a product. It's not a tool. It's literally a common set of language that you can use to normalize your cloud spend between cloud providers, between SaaS providers, to get more quickly to these outcomes. The Focus project is essentially this. This is Focus. It is a set of terms and dimensions and language that normalize how AWS talks about cloud spend next to how Google talks about it, next to how companies like Databricks talk about it, next to how your data center spend. Because we find that not only is everyone using different terms, but also how the currency is articulated is different. AWS versus Microsoft versus Google have different ways that they show the cost. As well, you might be translating between yen and US dollars. In this latest release of Focus 1.2, we've added the ability to have virtual and national currencies as part of this and provide better visibility into the cloud spend. So when we launched Focus a year ago, all of these providers now have native support for Focus. So essentially from AWS or Google or all of these, when you export your billing data, when you get that detailed usage reporting and cost reporting data, you can now get it in the Focus format, which simplifies the way it is delivered. Just last week, we announced as well 3 new providers. And this is really important because in addition to further adding cloud spend, we now starting to see SaaS and platform providers like Databricks and Grafana integrate their billing data into a consistent format because the FinOps practice has expanded beyond cloud into SaaS and PaaS providers as well. Critically, around the world, we're seeing a big influx, obviously, of the commercial and private sector doing FinOps practices. But one of the biggest adopters we've seen globally of the FinOps practice have been governments. So in North America, the US government has a mandate now to do FinOps in the Department of Defense. The UK government as well has that. Our team was in Brussels in Europe 2 months ago with the European Parliament, who are now adopting Focus across all of their agencies and deploying a FinOps practice. And as well, here in Japan, we've seen the Japanese government begin to adopt FinOps. So I'm very excited to welcome to the stage the Director General of the Digital Agency, Kusunoki-san.
Thank you. デジタル庁の楠木です。よろしくお願いします。 なんかこんな風にFinOpsをうまくやってるという講演の後にですね、我々これからうまくいってないんでちゃんとこれからFinOpsやりますっていう話なんで、ちょっと恥ずかしいなと思いながらお話をさせていただければという風に思うんですけれども、ちょうどですね、役所ってこの時期にいろんなことを閣議決定する国会も終盤で、だいたい役所の人事異動って7月の頭にやるもんですから、そうするとちょうどこの時期というのは、だいたい1学期の宿題というと変ですけども、ちょうど重点計画というのが、先週の金曜日に閣議決定をして、で、ちょっと暇になってゆっくりと考える時期、そして7月に移動する人は移動するみたいな時期なんですけども、私AI の他にマイナンバーとか公金受取口座登録とか、あと自治体のシステムのところを見てまして、今世間的に言うとですね、ちょうど選挙前に給付の話が上がって、なんとか国で給付できないのかと、そのためにデジタル庁を作ったんだろうみたいな話をですね、言われながら、ちょっと今すぐは大変ですみたいな、そんな話をちょうど今週していたりであったり、これからもお話ししますけれども、言ってみればなかなか今ちょうど2020年にですね、菅総理の時に、いろいろと、地方のシステムをこれから標準化をしていって、全部クラウドに乗っけていくんだ、ガバメントクラウドを作るんだという話を2020年に決めて、今年がいよいよ、だいたい1700団体あって20業務あって、34,000システムがある。この中の9割近くがこれからの短い期間の中で、クラウドに持っていこうとしてるんだけれども、何が起こってるかっていうと、なんか3割費用下がるって聞いてたんだけどな、おかしいな、みたいなことがちょうど起こっててですね、毎週のように今、各全国の地方からですね、何とかしてくれというご相談を今いただいているというようなところであったりします。で、ちょうどそういったことを今年の春からですね、ずっと議論をしておりました。これちょうど先週の金曜日に、この重点計画を閣議決定した後に官邸でやった会議の資料になるんですけれども、言ってみれば標準化そのものはなんとか進んでるんだけれども、なんか随分と金がかかってるぞと。これどうなってるんだというところでですね、総理からの指示に基づいて何をやらなきゃいけないかというところを考えていきましょうと。で、もともとやりたかったことっていうのは、これまでそれぞれの自治体の庁舎の中にオンプレのサーバーがあって、これをちゃんとずっと面倒を見ていくっていうのはそんなに簡単なことではないですし、東日本大震災の時にもですね、庁舎ごとサーバーが流されるみたいなことがいっぱいありました。で、戸籍に関してはその後、しっかりとバックアップのサーバーを東海に置いたんですけども、重機はじめとして他の事務も含めてどうやって災害対応していくのか。今からやるんだったらやっぱクラウドしかないだろう。特にコロナ禍の中でですね、迅速にワクチン接種はじめとしていろんなことができたのは、クラウドを上手に活用したからだから、これなんとかもっと広げていこうということを5年前に決めた。5年前に決めたけれども、神は細部に宿るというかですね、実際やってみるといっぱい難しい。そういう話を今日できればと思ってるんですけれども、で、今般、先週の金曜日に総合的な対策をやりますということを、これ、うちの平大臣が総理の前で発表したんですけども、官邸の会議で初めて多分、FinOps って言葉が堂々とこの、左側の、丸3の、見積もりチェックリストアプローチガイドの拡充等というところに、令和7年度中に、FinOps のガイドを作成するということが、はっきりと、デジタル大臣が総理に約束をしたというのが、先週の金曜日でして、本当にたまたまですけれども、このイベントの直前にですね、日本政府としても正式にFinOpsをちゃんとやると。これはですね、結構大変なことなんですよ。役所ってこれまで特に自治体のシステムって大体、ハードの5年に一度のリプレイスっていうのは大体5年リースですから、で、大体アプリは2週10年ぐらい使って、で、ハードは5年おきぐらいでリプレイスをしていってっていうので、 だいたいそのシステム公開の時期にそういうの得意な人はアサインするんだけども、終わったら剥がして他にも大事な仕事いっぱいありますからね。これ結構、その立ち上げた後もちゃんとモニタリングしてきちっとコストコントロールしてねっていうのは、これは結構自治体にとっては大きいインパクトのあることだし、国にとっても大きいインパクトのあることだと思います。みんな割とですね、仕事って物作っておしまいって人が多くてですね。あと、でも、システムって2年目、3年目にすごいコストって膨らんでいくもんだから、ここきちっとモニターしていくっていうのは大事なわけです。で、まあ、ずっと見積もり精査って言ってたわけですけども、何が起こってるかっていうと、まあ言ってみれば、まあ、地域のベンダーとか含めてまだクラウドのことよくわかんないから、人件費とかも含めてお勉強代も含めてパーンと積んでるわけですよね。で、やってみるとまあこんぐらいの手間だったから、もうちょっとこうしていきましょうみたいなことを多分、毎年こうアクチュアルの数字を見ながら、これクラウド費用だけじゃなくて、人のところっていうのもしっかりと見ていかないといけないし、まあ残念ながらまだまだ今ほとんどのシステムっていうのは、こう、オンプレの時代に動いてたものをそのままクラウドにリフトをしただけで、ちゃんとクラウドネイティブとか、あるいは、まあ、モダン化って言われてるようにはなってない。ただ今回ですね、あえて、モダン化ってことは一切この会議資料の中に入れないということにこだわったって言っていいのかわかんないですけども、まあ何がモダン化って結構ベンダーによっても似てることを言ってるんですけど微妙に違うので、こうやってやっぱ役所なんだからちょっと漢字にこだわってみようよということで、省力化自動化ですとかですね、あとちょっと古めかしい言い方をしてますけども、で、あともともと結構役所って丸ごと一式いくらっていう頼み方が多かったんですけども、まあ、ガバメントクラウドを始めたときに、ちゃんと足回りのコストも見ようということで、一旦上下分離したんですね。でもこれが結構町村にとって大変で、やっぱなかなかこう、1700の全国の自治体がですね、イヤースのインスタンスがこうなっててとかって大変なので、そこはなんかやっぱ一体調達も認めてっていいんじゃないと、サーチコストとしてきちっとグロスで管理をすればいいじゃないというところもありますし、あとはやっぱり業務の最適化も必要ですし、あとやっぱり標準化の過程でいろんなところにワンフィットオールでやろうと思うと、ちっちゃい団体から見ると機能増えちゃうんですよね。で、本当にこれいるんだっけっていうのをもう一回ちょっとこう叩き直したりだとか、まあそういったことを含めて今、なんとか膨れ上がってるコストをコントロールしようということで、先週政府は正式に日本としてFinOpsをやると。で、そのために今年度中にガイドをするということを決めました。で、まあそのためにそれぞれの主体においてやるべきことがあるよということと、まあこれもですね、ちょっとなかなか恥ずかしい話ではあるんだけれども、まあ2020年に3割削減って言った時って多分1ドル110円ぐらいでしたし、まあ、あとですね、結構地味に効いてるのが、結構地域のベンダーさんすごい頑張ってくれてたんですよ。その限られた予算の中でやるために。ところがクラウドを勉強し直してっていうことが単価が全部東京の単価で引き直されてですね、相当単価も上がっている。で、加えてこれまでであればそのリプレイスの期間をできるだけ団体ごとに分けてってだいたい5年でこう慣らすようにしてたわけですけども、まあ本来今回標準システムに移行するときにもそうやって慣らすことができればよかったんですけども、まあ直近でも異次元の少子化だったり、定額減税であったり、まあ思ったより結構システムの公開っていうのがいっぱいあったもんだから、結構開発がギリギリになって、もともとこうできれば去年ぐらいからどんどん移行していければよかったんだけれども、まあそうもいかなかったということで、まあ大体今年の年末年始ぐらいから先行団体の移行が始まって、多分まあそろそろですね、本格的にブワーッと今まさに毎週末何十という団体が移行していくというタイミングになってると。当然需給も逼迫をする。で、まあ5年前に考えてた時はですね、ある程度予算を出せば人も集まってやってくれるだろうと思ってたんですけど、まあ蓋を開けてみると、まあ世の中全体でですね、こう DX AI といって デジタル人材そのものがやっぱ全然足りてないですし、やっぱ公共っていろんな役所特有のルールを知らなきゃいけないこともあって、まあ、相当移行経費7000億以上基金で積んだんですけれども、なかなかやっぱ人手の問題っていうのは簡単には解決しないと。で、これをちゃんと財政も含めてどうやって面倒を見ていくかという議論と並行して、きちっと投資をしていくからには、数年後にはもっと自治体にとって負担が小さくて、ちゃんと新しい制度が出てきたときに俊敏に対応していけるような、そういう社会にお前らしていくんだよな、というところを、これからちゃんと約束を果たしていかなければいけない。我々はそういう、ところの中にいる中で、今年移行ということなんで、ちょうど見積もりの成果はじめとして、今結構、先ほどハッカソンの写真があって、ああいう写真が資料にあった方がいいなと思ったんですけども、結構都道府県単位で真面目にですね、クラウドの勉強とか始めて、CSP と一緒にワイワイとここどうやってコスト下げていけるかみたいなことの話し合いを始めてます。本当のちゃんとしたコンティニュアスに見ていくというFinOpsは、おそらく2026年度から始まっていくことだと思いますけれども、そういう意味では、今年はまさにですね、国と自治体にとってもFinOps元年と言っていいのではないかというふうに思います。で、いろんなことが現実には起こってて、これって多分民間セクターも一緒じゃないかと思うんですけども、結局いきなりクラウドに置くと決めてもですね、それぞれシステムのリプレイス時期は違うし、今回、クラウドに行くと決めたのって二重業務と呼ばれている標準化対象の制度の住民基本台帳とか、福祉のシステムとか、戸籍とか、そういうものですけれども、それ以外にも財務会計とか、いろんなその文書管理とか、いろんなシステムが役所の中にあって、それらの多くっていうのはまだまだオンプレにあるので、インフラも二重管理になってきますし、回線も増えてくるし、ネットワークも複雑になるし、この辺をきれいにしていくっていうのはやっぱり5年6年かかると。ここの中で、FinOpsもですね、クラウドだけではなくて、今後はオンプレの世界も含めて全体見ていくんだということを先ほどもおっしゃられていたので、まさに我々そういったコストコントロール全体でどうやって俯瞰していくかというところにまさに課題認識を持って取り組もうとしているというところであります。この辺は言い訳ですね。この5年でだいぶ世の中マクロ経済状況も変わりましたという話と、為替も変わりましたと。で、ちょっとですね、あんまり自治体の市場って馴染みのない方もいらっしゃるかもしれないんで、簡単に状況をお伝えできればというふうに思うんですけども、多分ですね、今一番課題認識を持っているのは一般紙とか町村のところでありまして、ここってもともとオールインワンのパッケージで、だいたいベンダーさんのデータセンターで県単位で昔は大型機とかを共同で運用してましたので、それが突然クラウドの移行に伴って上下分離をするわ。しかもなんとなく暗分していたところがですね、各団体できれいにタグついて明細が来るようになったんで、やっぱり人口数千人みたいなところがもうドーンと何倍に費用が跳ね上がるということが起こっている。で、あと、その人口10万人ぐらいのところは今年バーッと移行するところが多いんで、まさに今課題認識を持ちながらどうやったらこれコスト落ちるんだ。一番考えてる。で、政令市はですね、もともとその各システムマルチベンダーでかなり重厚に作ってカスタマイズとかもいっぱいあるんで、ちょっと移行遅れるとこが多いです。なのでシステム数で言うと9割が今回移行するんだけど、人口ベースで言うとまだまだ結構古いシステムって当面残るんですけど、ただやっぱ政令市って場所柄ですね、やっぱすごいエンジニアもいっぱいいるし、優秀な職員の方も、やっぱ体制もですね、一人常識ではなくて何十人もいてというようなところがあって、本当にFinOps で CSP のユーザーグループで講演するような方もですね、名古屋市とかいらっしゃったりしますし、政令市は若干遅れてくる中で、かなりFinOpsのことも含めてすでに勉強されている。 で、都道府県はもともとどっちかというと町村の一部の事務を持ってたんですけれども、そういったその自分たちで持ってるシステムの話だけじゃなくて、今後は、ちゃんと、域内の自治体に対して一緒にFinOps勉強しようというようなことも含めてですね、先進的なところは、東京都はじめ、愛媛県とかいろんなところでですね、市町村をまとめて、一緒に勉強していくというところになってきている。ここに多分FinOpsの飛び道具を我々どんどん供給をしていかなきゃいけない。そういう状況ですし、みんな今一生懸命勉強しようとしているというところです。で、ちょっと生々しいやつを公表してんで多分出して大丈夫なやつなんですけど。これはですね、中核市で人口30万人弱のところの例ですけど、もうクラウド利用料だけで基盤費用がボーンと跳ね上がっていてですね、で一番恐ろしいのはこのソフトウェアの部分が3倍ぐらいになってるんですよね。これ難しいんですよね。なんかクラウド費用ってまだ単価があるからリソース確保でこんだけいりますっていうのは分かりやすいんだけど、ソフトの部分って開発費なんで、なんで高いんですかって言われても、いやいや、開発大変だったんでって言われちゃうとね、それ以上のことはなかなか言えなくて、ここが一番苦しいっていうところですけども、これも結構きついですね。これクラウド利用のバーンと上がってるところ、人口8万人ぐらいで、今オンプレからクラウドに移行するんですけども、やはり、クラウド利用料だけで基盤費用が3倍超えているようなケース。これね、頑張って見積もりいろいろ叩いていくとですね、もうちょっとここの二重化いらないよねとかって、バーンって頑張って叩いてもでも2倍切るのって結構ちょっと大変なぐらいだったり、あとね、理論上叩くことはできるんですよ。でもその構成でベンダーさんに組んでもらえるかってそんな簡単じゃなくて、テストやり直しじゃないですか。メモリの容量変えたら。その費用って持ってくれんのとかも含めて、ちゃんと全部自動化されててぐるぐる CI/CD で回していけばいいんだったら楽だけど、現実そうなってないので、これ結構大変なところですよね。だから、基盤費用を見直すためであっても、やっぱオブザバトリーもはじめとしてですね、普段から数字を取っていくって営みがないと先のステップにいかない。これはだいぶ悩ましいことだと思います。これも結構、ここはね、クラウド利用料結構頑張って叩いて、人口1万人ぐらいの小規模なんで、こういう団体って本当はもっともっと跳ね上がるパターンが多いんですけども、クラウド運用費のところは結構頑張って減らしてると。ただ、結構自治体ってなかなか人口1万人ぐらいだと自分でクラウド運用するって難しいんで、これまでやってなかったクラウドの運用管理補助っていう仕事をお願いする。で、そこが純増で1000万円ぐらい乗ってくるんで、システム運用作業費は倍以上にやっぱりなってて、この規模の一般会計60億程度の団体にとってはですね、これ大変な負担です。かといって、覚えて自分でコンパネポチポチしろっていうわけにもいかないですし、ここどういうふうに、経費かからないようにしていくか。やっぱですね、私も結構もうこの問題昨年ぐらいからやばいことになるっていうんで一生懸命FinOpsもそのために勉強を始めたんですけど、大体出てくるのなんか内政でしっかりエンジニア確保してるところで、これどうやって参考にすればいいんだってね、ドキドキしながら、すごい悩みながら勉強を始めたというようなところがありました。で、もう一個ですね、今日だいぶ AI の話もあったので、若干その話もできればというふうに思うんですけれども、これ全体で見るとですね、経費の話よりも、今回の重点計画の特徴というのは、ともかく AI を使い倒していきましょうというようなところ、ここすごい力を入れているということがあります。で、デジタル庁は令和5年度からですね、全庁に AI を展開をしておりまして、だいたい最初の令和5年の時点で半分ぐらいの職員が AI を使っていました。で、最初は実証でやってたんで、令和5年と令和6年で違う事業者が取られて、全然違う UI になって、これ将来どうしていくんだと。コストもどう見ていくんだというような 議論がありましたけど、令和7年度からちょうどこの4月からですね、内製に切り替えて職員が、AWS さんのオープンソースで確か GenU ってやつをベースに、かなりカスタマイズしたものを作って、認証とかもシングルサインオンにして、実は内製の生成 AI 環境っていうのをこの4月にリリースをしておりまして、今だいたいデジ庁職員が多分1200人ぐらいいて、その中の900人以上が使っている。だいたい8割ぐらいの方が、生成 AI を使っているというような状況になっています。流行りの使い方っていくつかあるのですが、パブリックコメントの分類。最近AI 系でパブコメやると、だいたい著作権どうなんだとかいろんなコメントいただく何千件ってきたときに、やっぱ最後あれって人が読むためにみんな出してるんで、読むっていうとこは読まなきゃいけないんですけど、同じ内容結構多いんですよね。だからそこの分類って昔は1年生、2年生の若手がですね、すごい残業しながらやってたのが、だいぶ今 AI に切り替わってまして、パブコメの分類であったりとか、あと私は正直言うと、あれです。英語のメールの返信。でもこれ結構危ないんですよ。この間、ある国際会議のホストを引き受けるっていうメールを、こんなメール受け取ったから、ちょっとこれ返事書いてよって言ったらですね、いや、引き受けるよとしか、プロンプトに書いてないのに、ベニューは後で部下が送るからとかって書いてある。これちゃんと英語読めないとですね、全部任せるとやばいっていうのがあります。で、今これの悩みも、もうオープンソースでテンプレートを出すところまでは決めてるんです。でも、テンプレート出したって、じゃあまた各自治体が運用管理補助者を別に調達して1000万、2000万ってかけたら、これ大変だよね。だからやっぱりそれを1700で別々に承諾するぐらいだったらまとめてデジ庁で面倒見てよっていう話になるんですけど、じゃあ1700団体が個別になんか一人でも二人でもすげえいっぱい AI 使うやつがいたらですよ、まさにFinOps AI を全部デジ庁でやらなきゃいけないのか。ここ今悩みです。できるだけ地方の AI 展開を加速したい。けれども丸ごとデジ庁で受けようと思っても運用含めて結構大変だよね。どの順番でやろうか。で、そこのコスト負担って AI ってやっぱり API 費用安くなったとはいえ結構高いんで悩みだったりします。あと庁内でもう一個流行り、これ私自身でここ1ヶ月ぐらいずっと今年この標準システムの移行に伴って外事を全部なくすっていうんで、全国の自治体で200万個ぐらい文字作ってるやつ。これ渡辺の鍋だけで60個あって、斎藤の斎がね、74個あるんですよ。で、斎藤の塔が30個あるから、斎藤さんだけで理論上2000通り以上作れたりするんですけれども、これのね、検索ソフトをずっとベンダーにお願いしても、なんか忙しいから無理って言われてて、しょうがないから5月の連休に作ったらなんか動き始めたんで、楽しくなって作っちゃったんですけれども、こんなことやったりですとか、あと、これちょっと右の方に出てるのは、こういうやつを全部 AI から叩けるようにして MCP ってプロトコルがあって、今庁内でむちゃくちゃ流行ってるのは、この MCP サーバーをいろんな法令検索とかいろんなものにともかく MCP のエンドポイントを生やして、で、自分でクラウドコードとか契約をしてバイブコーディングで何かものを作るみたいなのがすごい流行ってます。で、ただ早く自腹じゃなくてこれみんな役所でも仕事として使えるようにするために、準備進めてるんですけども、なかなか日本国内で閉じていいものが使えないということでですね。この辺の、じゃあ、これからオープンにするものだったら別に日本にこだわらないで GPU 空いてるところでやってもいいようにしようかとか、まさにそういうルール作りも今 AI のために進めてるというようなところです。で、最後話戻って、こういった AI やるためにもですね、やっぱり FinOps というか、継続的にモニタリングをしていくということが重要で、そしてやっぱり今回のこういう価格高騰を招いた根っこの要因というのは、我々がやっぱ供給制約を考えないでいろいろ急ぎすぎた。 人が育つところが間に合わない中での転換をやった。ここをどうやって AI でギャップを埋めていけるかとかですね。あるいはどうやって試行錯誤しながら人が育つ環境っていうのを作っていくか。そういうこととですね、この5年前に我々が何が足りてなかったかということをよく反省しながらですね、事業者や地方の自治体と共に我々自身が成長していくためにこれから何をしていくべきかということをちょっとしっかりと考えていきながら、今年度以降しっかりとFinOpsに取り組んでまいりたいというふうに思います。ご清聴ありがとうございました。
Thank you so much, Kusunoki-san. I was watching the translation on Wordly, which, first of all, AI, amazing to do that translation, but very, very impressed by the progress the Japanese government has made this year. We met a year ago, last August, in the digital agency office, and you've made amazing progress in that time. So it's really great to see. I'm glad we have that recording, in fact, because I think the governments in the other parts of the world will want to see that. We'll have to get it translated. So next up, I wanted to bring up two very important people within the Linux Foundation and the FinOps Foundation community. Here in Japan, obviously, the FinOps Foundation is just getting started. There is a Japan chapter, which a few of you are involved with, and that Japan chapter is being spearheaded by the Linux Foundation's VP here, Noriaki Fukuyasu, as well as from Hitachi, and also the Linux Foundation Japan evangelist Nakamura-san. So I wanted to invite the two of them up here to tell you a little bit more about what's happening in the community here for FinOps Foundation Japan and all the efforts that are happening. Please welcome them to the stage.
.ランチタイム前の、貴重なお時間を少しだけいただいて、今、JR からお話あったように、FinOps の、ジャパンチャプターの話をしたいと思います。で、楠木さんが言われてきたように、もう今年、来年から、本格的に日本企業も、日本のね、政府も FinOps をやっていくと。やっていくんだけれども、人材がこれから足りてない人材育成をしていく、フレームワークが必要だっていう話がありましたけども、まさに、やっぱり日本でコミュニティを盛り上げることこそが、人材育成をしていく上で、とっても重要になってくるんじゃないかなというふうに思います。ということで、今から、じゃあ、日本における FinOps のコミュニティってどういうものなのかっていう点をですね、日立製作所の、中村さんに、お話ししていただきたいなというふうに思います。じゃあ、自己紹介も含めてお願いします。
はい。私ですね、日立製作所およびですね、Linux ファンデーションのジャパンエヴァンジェリストと、あと CNCF のガバニングボードやってます中村と申します。そうですね、私自身はずっともう、20年以上、オープンソースコミュニティとかオープンスタンダードの活動をしております。で、最近ですね、一番、最もホットなですね、活動がこちらの FinOps の、ジャパンチャプターの、活動になっております。まず、ジャパンチャプターの紹介を簡単にさせていただきます。目的というところがですね、FinOps のフレームワークはもうこちらに JR がですね、提唱しているものでして、FinOps ファンデーションが策定しているですね、そういった FinOps の標準の普及活動、およびもう一つやりたいのはですね、日本から出てくるような要望をですね、FinOps ファンデーションの枠組みの中にもですね、入れていくようなアップストリーム活動というのを日本で促進するというのが目的になっております。で、その目的をですね、達成するためにですね、まず普及活動というのを知っていただけなければいけないというところで、ミートアップを開催しようというところで、四半期に1回程度を目標にしております。こちらですね、ジャパンチャプターの設立自体はですね、まだ1年も経ってないですよね。ミートアップも2回ほどやってるというところになっています。で、あと、FinOps ファンデーションのマテリアルですけど、今、もうほとんど全ては英語しかないというところになっていますので、これから、FinOps 元年をですね、実現するためには、やはりローカライゼーション、日本語化というところが必須だと思っております。ですね、また教育、FinOps ファンデーション、JR からもありましたけど、サーティフィケーション、資格、がですね、いっぱいありますけど、そういった資格試験の日本語化みたいなところも、推進していきたいと考えています。で、もう一つの活動と言いますのが、今回、FinOps、 X で東京が開かれておりますが、こういった FinOps ファンデーション公式イベントの開催する際の支援、スピーカー探してきたりでありますとか、そういったところを含めて支援していきたいというところになっております。で、運営としましては今どうなってるかと言いますと、Linux ファンデーションが事務局、FinOps ファンデーションはですね、Linux ファンデーションのアンブレラプロジェクトというところになっておりますので、事務局というかもうほぼ福安さんお願いしますということになっておりますけど、ですね、運営メンバーとしては、FinOps ファンデーションメンバー企業が、まだ日本にはですね、あんまりいないんですけど、そのメンバー企業の有志と、あとユーザー企業の、メンバー企業じゃなくても、ユーザー企業のプラクティショナー、実践者の、有志の方々、そういった方々から成り立って、今のところ月1でですね、定例会開いてですね、じゃあ次のミートアップどうしようかとか、そういったところのネタ出しのと、ミートアップが決まったらですね、路地回りどうするかっていうところを中心に、話し合いながらワイワイやっております。で、ですね、最新の情報というところなんですけど、ちょっと今まだ確か、SNS は確かないですよね、まだ。はい。ので、今のところはこちらのですね、QR コードがたどれるホームページにですね、見ていただければ、ミートアップの情報もありますし、あとおそらくですけど、今日、このイベントに登録された方々はですね、今後ミートアップ開催される際には、おそらく FinOps ファンデーションの方から、ですね、メールが行くようになるとは思います。はい。
ありがとうございます。中村さんを中心として、FinOps のジャパンチャプターというものが、出来上がったのって、ちょうど1年ぐらい、前だったんじゃないかなと思うんですけども、その FinOps ファンデーションジャパンチャプターを立ち上げたその当時の、ある意味FinOps に関して、中村さんが感じていた課題的なものが、これはやっぱりジャパンでチャプターを作って、ローカルコミュニティを盛り上げなきゃいけないなって至ったその課題感みたいなのを少し共有いただけますか？
そうですね。どうして設立に至ったかっていうところから振り返りますとですね、なぜこれを知ったかと言いますと、2年ぐらい前ですね、私が所属する会社は CNCF に、入りました。で、その時にですね、CNCF の人に、キューブコンのヨーロッパっていうイベントがありまして、そこのコロケッテッドイベントで、たまたまですね、FinOps の、なんか会議みたいなのがあって、そこになんかわけもわからず連れて行かれましてですね。その時はですね、まだ FinOps ファンデーションって、クラウドベンダー全部入ってなかったんですよね。なので、なんか、単にコスト削減するための団体なんだな、ぐらいに思ってたんですけど、そこからですね、半年ぐらい経ったらですね、なんかいろんなクラウドベンダーが入り出して、FinOps の動きが、そうですね、なんか、JR も言ってましたが、毎年売買ゲームで、なんか FinOps が盛り上がり始めていたというところで、クラウドベンダーが入り出してきたってことはもうこれ単なるコスト削減じゃないなと。これは、そんな話をよく聞いてみると、価値の最大化っていうところで、言っていてですね、価値の最大化っていうことだったら何というか、みんなウィンウィンで、これは面白いなっていうところで、注目し始めてですね、たというところでした。で、1年ぐらい前にですね、じゃあ FinOps を日本で広めたいなと、思い始めまして、そこでそう思って、いろいろ、情報を集めたり、話をしていたところですね、たまたまですね、福安さんが、Linux ファンデーション内部の会議でしたっけ？その時になんか隣に JR が行った。
隣に JR が座ってました。
そうですね。なんか、その時初対面でたまたまなんか、連絡先もらったと。
そうです。隣に座ってて、俺 JR って言うんだって、これ俺の、連絡先だから、連絡してって言われて、で、しばらくそうなんだって思って、しばらく何もしなかったっていう感じでしたね。
そうですよね。そんで、そういう話があったぐらいの時にですね、ちょうどですね、日本でFinOps のミートアップが開こうという人がいてですね、確かメルカリさんのミートアップですよね。そうですね。確か、日本で最初の FinOps のミートアップというのがあって、そこに、出てみたらですね、なんか、FinOps を、やりたいって人が結構集まりましたよね、あの時。100人近くもう最初、いたような気がします。で、結構いるなというのが分かって、そんでですね、その中にFinOps の、JR の、本のことも話題になってですね、なんか、 英語しかないというところで、ちょうどですね、私がその時ですね、別の書籍でオライリージャパンさんの翻訳プロジェクトやってて、じゃあこれオライリージャパンさんに提案すりゃいいじゃんっていう、話が、そこで立ち上がりました。はい。で、ですね、そこで、その翻訳プロジェクトのメンバーっていうのが実はですね、このジャパンチャプターの、そうですね、運営の中心でもあったりというところで、そういうところで、日本のコミュニティの原型みたいなものが、できました。で、福安さんに相談したら、JR が、そういう話してたよっていうところと結びついてですね、ちょうどさらにその半年ぐらい前に私、CNCF のですね、ジャパンチャプターっていうのも立ち上げていたので、じゃあこの同じ枠組みがですね、LF のプロジェクトだし使えるんじゃないかというところで、始まったというところです。で、課題感というのは何であるかっていうと、やっぱりこの日本語なんですよ。やっぱり英語しかないと、もうこれじゃ日本の人わからないっていうのと、あと、FinOpsの勉強してみると、やっぱカルチャーですね。日本の企業のカルチャーっていうのが、やっぱグローバルと違うと。グローバルの企業って、やっぱトップダウンなんですよね。FinOps のイベント、FinOps X とか行ってみると、やっぱ事例の話とかあると、もう経営の人が出てきて、もう上から落として綺麗にやってるんですよね。けど日本ってやっぱボトムアップの文化っていうところがあるので、ここ文化も違うので、こういった文化の差みたいなところをですね、うまいこと埋めていかないときついなとか、あと組織も違いますよね。財務部門の考え方っていうのは多分会社ごとにも違ったりもするでしょうし、会社によってはもう部の中にね、財務大臣みたいな人もいたりしますし、そういったところもあるので、ペルソナみたいなところも若干違うだろうなとかですね。そういうのを埋めないといけないと思って、ジャパンチャプター立ち上げて、まずは翻訳からなんですけど、ですね、ゆくゆくはそのジャパンのカルチャーみたいなところを踏まえた、FinOps のフレームワークみたいなものをうまく、作って広められるといいかなと思っております。はい。
なるほど。ありがとうございます。実際に今、ジャパンのチャプターっていうのを立ち上げて、ミートアップも大体四半期に1回ぐらいのペースでやってますよね。で、四半期に1回ぐらいのペースでやってるんですけども、大体どんな方が今参加されてますか？何ですかね、業界というか、あと役割的な観点で。
ですね、見てますと、そうですね。意外とやっぱりそうですね。いや、私、CNCF とかやってるともう本当にエンジニアしかいないんですけど、FinOps だと、エンジニア以外にもやはり、財務の担当の方って人もいますし、けどやっぱり見てて思うのがまだまだベンダーが多いかなっていうのがあって、やっぱツールのベンダーとか、そうですね。が多いかなというところがあって、ちょっとエンドユーザーの、FinOps の、ファンデーションの本体の方はもうエンドユーザー中心で回してるんですけど、ちょっと日本の方はまだそうなってないかなっていうのを感じてます。はい。
逆に言うと、やっぱりミートアップを運営する側からすると、エンドユーザーにもっと来てほしいなっていう、やっぱそういう思いがありますか？
そうですね。エンドユーザーに来てほしいっていうのと、あとはもう一つ、ちょっと日本の特殊なところなんですけど、日本ってエンドユーザーのですね、に寄り添う存在として、SI ベンダーっていう、人たちがいます。というか、私が一つすると。なので、SI ベンダーからするとですね、FinOpsってともすると敵に見えちゃうんですよね。SI ベンダー、コスト削減って言っちゃうと、SI ベンダーの売り上げが減るように、思われちゃうような、そういった側面もあるので、そうですね、ちょっと SI ベンダーの人にもですね、ぜひ、参加していただいてですね、FinOpsって単なるコストの削減だけじゃないという、その価値の最大化なんだっていうところを感じてほしいというところもあります。
この会場で、いわゆるエンドユーザーってどれぐらいいらっしゃいます？だからちょっとね、やっぱり少ないわけですよね。ぜひやっぱりエンドユーザーにもっともっと関わっていただきたい。で、できればね、そのエンドユーザーの方に、私たちのそのFinOpsのジャパンのチャプターの運営にももっともっと携わっていただきたいと。
そうですね。はい。こちらの運営の、メンバーの決め方とかいうところも今はちょっとまだ手探りなところはあるんですけど、エンドユーザー企業の方でこちらの運営に携わりたいって方がいればぜひにというところと、あと会議室ですね。ちょっともうだいぶ身近なところになりますと、ミートアップ開く際の会議施設っていうところが FinOps ファンデーションとしてはですね、やはりエンドユーザーの会議室を使ってくれという風になってますので、会議室貸してくれるだけでもですね、実は嬉しかったりしますので、そういうところからでもですね、ぜひ 参画していただければというところです。
中村さんの観点から、FinOps の、例えばその運営に参加する、もしくはFinOpsのコミュニティに関わるっていうことから得られる、美味しい点、ベネフィットってなんだと思いますか？
いや、もうベネフィットはですね、やっぱそのFinOpsに詳しい人と知り合いになれるっていうところが、もう最大のメリットになります。ちょっとあんまりこういうこと言うのもなんですけど、ですね、普通ですね、そういう専門家の人と話そうとするとですね、運が悪いとですね、高額なコンサル料を要求されてしまいますよね。なんか、じゃあ見積もりをとか言われてしまいますけど、こういったコミュニティに入るとですね、もうそういうすごい、まさにトップコンサルタントの人も実はいたりするわけですよね。コミュニティに貢献していると、そういったもう、知見を持った人と、いろいろ話をして情報を得られたりとか、そうですね、まさにFinOpsのヒントを得られたりしますので、そこが最大のベネフィットだと思いますので、ぜひ、コミュニティに顔を出して、リモートじゃなくて実際に対面で参加していただいて、そうですね、みんなと話していただくと、そういったところをやってほしいなというところです。はい。
コミュニティを運営している上で、こういったタイプの、方が、今、その自分たちのコミュニティには、ちょっと足りてないな、みたいな、そういったのってあったりしますか？
そうですね、そこら辺、いろんなところで言えるところなんですけど、そうですね、やっぱり、エヴァンジェリストみたいな人はもっと欲しいかなというところですね。
そうですね。
マーケ系の人といいますか、マーケもですね、その企業の負けじゃなくてそのコミュニティのマーケですね。そのFinOpsを広めるためにいろんなところに露出したりとか、いろんな人と話して、話をつけて、広めてくれる人、そういった人を、もっと欲しいなっていうところあります。もちろん今もいるんですけど、まだまだ全然足りてないっていう。
そうですね。あとLinux、その FinOps のジャパンチャプターだけじゃなくって、Linux ファンデーションのリージョナルコミュニティ全体的に言えると思うんですけども、やっぱり女性の参加が少ないなっていうのはあって。
そうですね。ダイバーシティも全然足りてないというところもございます。
そうですね。で、一応Linux ファンデーションのイベントのルールで、例えば基調講演やるんだったら、その中で1名は絶対女性じゃなければいけないっていうルールがあったりだとか、パネルディスカッション、2人だったらギリセーフなんですよ、実は。これ3人以上でパネルをやるんだったら、その中の1人は絶対女性じゃなければいけないっていう、そういうルールがありまして、だから私たちがコミュニティ活動をしていく上で、本当に女性が関わってくださって、そしてリーダーシップを取っていただくって、とっても重要なので、ぜひ、ご参加いただきたいなと思います。
そうですね。やはりダイバーシティっていうところがもう、やはりコミュニティの発展ってところには欠かせなくって、私がこの前にやってた CNCF っていうコミュニティがそこがまさに、すごくうまく回ってる例だと思ってまして、やはり、ダイバーシティ、性別だけじゃなくて人種とかいろんなところが、ばらけてですね、そういう人たちがもう、それぞれの人脈でうまいことを普及活動をやってて、いい感じに広がってるのを目の当たりにしてますので、FinOps の方でもそういうことができるといいかなっていうのはすごく思っています。
多様性があるコミュニティって本当参加してて楽しかったりしますからね。ぜひ楽しいジャパンのコミュニティにしていきたいなというふうに思います。じゃあ中村さん最後にですけども、これからぜひ多くの方にコミュニティに参加していただきたいと思うんですけども、最初は何をすればいいですか？コミュニティに参加っていう意味では。
何をすればいいか。そうですね。一番いいのは、FinOps ファンデーション、ジャパンチャプターのミートアップに、出ていただくというところ。ある意味ですね、ここにいる皆さんはもう最初の一歩を踏み出しているとは言えます。もう FinOps のイベントに参加していただいているので、はい。なので、それを継続的にするためには、次はジャパンチャプターのミートアップにまずは参加していただくというところから、お願いしたいなと思います。
あと、ミートアップだとか、様々な情報を定期的に入手しようと思ったら、どんなチャンネルがあるんですか？
ですね、今実はまだ整備中なんですけど、ひとまずはここのページに上げていこうとは思いますので、はい、お願いしますというところと、あとは、そのうち SNS も、なんとか解説しようと思いますので、それまでの間はですね、SNS を FinOps でのキーワードでエゴサーチしていただければというところになります。
なるほど。はい、ありがとうございます。というわけでですね、私たち、生まれたばかりの、日本のコミュニティなんですけれども、これから 理事長さんも、FinOps の、普及を引っ張ってくださいますんで、そういったものをどんどん私たちがそこをサポートしていく上でも、やっぱり日本で、FinOps を理解するエンジニアの方、それからFinOps に関わる方をもっともっと増やしていかなければいけないと。というのであれば、やっぱり私たちの日本のコミュニティがもっともっと大きくなって、もっともっと多くの方をインクルードしていくっていう、そういったもので、ある必要があると思います。なので、この普及活動を、広げて、これからもどんどん行きたいと思いますので、ぜひ、定期的に、ここですね。この、FinOps Foundation Japan Chapter の GitHub ページを、ご覧いただきたいなというふうに思います。はい。それでは、ちょうどいい時間になりましたので、ここら辺で、FinOps Foundation Japan Chapter の、宣伝を、終了させていただきます。ご清聴いただきましてありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。
Thank you. Actually, you keep that one. I've got this one. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Nakamura-san. Excellent. So amazing to hear the story of how that all came together. And thank you to everyone who has contributed and participated so far in this community. As they mentioned, FinOps is a cultural practice, and it's a practice that is focused around end users, the people managing the value of cloud. That's what we're all here for, and that's what my team and the Linux Foundation community is focused on as part of that. So I know it's been a long morning of talks so far, but I wanted to let you know that we're coming up at the end of the keynote. We've got a lot of great things happening today. So there's lunch, which is very important, very soon here. There will be chalk talks in these rooms down here, as well as breakout sessions in here as well. And at the end of the day, we'll come back for a keynote. We're going to dig in a little more deeply around FinOps for AI. So please go out, enjoy. Looking forward to talking out there, and have a great day.
Hey everyone, producer Andrew here. Thank you so much for watching and for your support. For more FinOps X 2025 content, go check out our YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, and leave comments and questions for all of our wonderful speakers. We appreciate your support.